Okay, so everybody, we're here today with Alex Grover, extraordinaire. And the first thing we're going to talk about in this class is tool sterilization.
Yeah, this is something that we always talk about and we never really show or do. And it is important. We do not have a lot of disease in Utah, but we do have cytospora on your stone fruits and fire blight on your pomes. The defense we have about this, and I hate doing this because it's an aerosol, but aerosol bathroom cleaners. In particular, things that imitate your classic spray on Lysol. This one is got a bunch of stuff I'm not even going to try and pronounce in it, but it's the same stuff that's in your classic Lysol. And you just take this, and I've got my loppers here, you know, really fancy, and I'm going to spray it fairly wet, and I move it so it gets into all the cracks. I don't get a lot of loose dirt on my loppers and on my hand pruners. Mostly this is caked on plant juices.
Yeah.
You'll notice I just saw some plant material green. I just pulled it off with my fingers. And work it. The working also helps if there's any built up caked on grease or plant juice, is what it usually is. It does help stir that up. Now, I do usually do this in my gloves these days because you notice I just wiped it off. Well, if there's any contaminants, where are those?
On your fingers.
On my fingers. Now with these, I prune in jeans. I do not prune in nice stuff. I do not prune in soft pants. That's going to get off any of the loose stuff. Okay, both sides. Now, being the honestly autistic person I am, because that gets it right in where the teeth are. That's a harder spot to hit from the sides.
Okay, everybody, now we are moving on. Well, we're here with Alex Grover, and we are going to talk about central leader, modified central leader, and open vase. And Alex is going to explain why that's even necessary to understand.
And this time I'm going to be safety conscious and wear my gloves. I already got 2 or 3 slices today because I wasn't wearing them. Because hey, I was just doing a demonstration on sterilization. So typically there are 3 main shapes you can prune your tree into. Now I say traditionally, you can probably figure out dozens of different ways to prune and shapes to prune. But these are the 3 predominant, easy to do, remember, and implement. And they cover most of what you need, so you don't need to get creative in getting more shapes. Now, the first one is what we call a central leader. The central leader is going to have a really tall stem in the middle.
And I'll put a screenshot of my pawpaw because it's an excellent example of central leader.
So it's going to be straight up, and it's going to let that tree go to whatever full height that tree is capable of doing. On an apple, typically that's going to be 20 to 25 feet with what we do now.
And aspens are growing on a central leader. So
yeah.
There's that there.
About 20 to 25 feet with the rootstocks we use now. That's great. It's got some decent productivity, but 25 feet, folks, that's a long way up to get your apples and your pears. That's a lot of space. So they have what they call a modified central leader. So that's a central leader where you're knocking the top off. You notice that top hand action there? Mm-hmm. So instead of going all the way up, you're cutting it so it's going to be shorter. And you can keep these fairly short so that you can use a ladder that's 6 to 8 feet and you can get the fruit on top. And then you've got an open center. And an open center, instead of having something going straight up the middle, you have stuff that's spreading out. How you use these depends on the expert. Our county agent, who's a wonderful guy, wonderful friend, very knowledgeable, really prefers a modified central leader. He works a lot with orchards. And so he's got to get optimal fruiting for them. And a modified central leader is going to be your optimal fruit production for the size tree you're putting in. And so I get that point. That's an excellent point. There's also certain trees, like certain apples. Red Delicious, supposedly Fuji, although my Fuji refused to put up a central leader. Supposedly they do better with central leader. You kind of have to go with what the tree says, though. My Fuji, clearly, unless it sends up a central leader, is not going to have a central leader. That's okay. Deciding this is not just a matter of, I want it to do this, it's a matter of what is it giving me. And sometimes that's what you get. Peaches, most of your stone fruits are going to do really well as an open center. Again, there's going to be differences in that, and a lot depends. If you're going on to a tree that's older, if it's never been pruned before, or if it's been years since it's pruned, you really have to take what it gives you. One of the problems that we have in the industry is every time we show fruit trees, it's like, let's show them in an orchard where they've been getting good pruning since day one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not reality unless you're in an orchard. So keep that in mind when you're doing a home fruit tree, being flexible in how you basically, you're designing your tree. And how you decide to prune it and design it is going to be optimal, because you're not going to fit into a book definition necessarily. Okay, so let's go over and look at this tree. What we have here is actually a cluster of 3 different trees. We've got an apple on this side, an apple on that side, and a pear in the center. Now this pear is really none of the above. Because Malie is using a, what do we call this?
Backyard
officially?
orcharding.
The backyard orcharding technique. She's planted 3 trees basically in the same hole, and is allowing each of the 3 trees to go in a different direction. So right here is one of those examples of when the 3 trees I talked about is highly modified, because we're really not doing it. If you put all these 3 trees together optimally, they would look a lot like an open center.
Right.
I don't think it's maybe quite as optimal as we want.
Right.
And Malie, I really want to take out your central leader.
Yes, and that's what I was going to point out. This right here is kind of acting, it's a pear tree, and it really wants to be a central leader. So you can see that I cut it way down below. I cut it knee height when I first pruned it, so it should go out, but instead it threw up this big branch, and it's kind of trying to be the central leader.
And that's one of the struggles you have. This is a technique for getting a lot of fruit into a small space, and the trees don't necessarily agree with us on how we do stuff.
So we manhandle them into submission.
We design them into submission. I mean, manhandle, yeah, that's pretty
Dan?
good.
Yes, that's pretty much out.
And so I really don't feel like I can do this in any of the 3 traditional methods. That's okay. This is primarily Dave Wilson pushes this type of management, and I think it's great, but you have to, even more so than normal pruning, you have to spend a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of thought doing this.
You absolutely have to think about what you're doing when you're pruning.
And I was gonna hit the emphasis on thought again.
Yeah.
Pruning is not, if you do it enough, it becomes almost automatic. But even now, after doing very intensive fruit tree pruning for the last 10 plus years, I still find that I really prefer to step back and walk away from my tree and go back and look at it from a distance to see what I'm doing. And usually I find that I'm doing okay, I don't need it, but it gives me that perspective that I know I'm not clowning around with it. I'm not leading it astray. I am taking care of what I need to on it. And even on trees that I plant at the same time, a lot of times they will look different when I'm done.
Yeah.
At the end of the season, they'll look about the same. But when I'm doing them, they look very, very different, because they're different trees, and I don't have the demands that a full-time orchardist has. It's a different world. And so be careful. It's not that the orchard videos are bad. It's
it
just,
may not be good for your property.
it's just that they may not be appropriate for what you're doing or the conditions you run into. So do you want me to take this central leader down a little bit and
Okay,
may
I've
have
been
it more of
looking
an
at
open
that,
center?
and I am willing. See, with Alex, I'm able to talk to Alex like this because, you know, he's my friend, I hope.
Fiend. You said that
He's
wrong.
my
It's
fiend. I am willing to take it to here.
That is what I was hoping you would say.
See, we agreed. Yay.
She paid me to say that, by the way. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is
Dana
I'm going
agrees too.
to take out some of these
You can take them all off.
suckers. I don't always necessarily take them all off because suckers have value. See, I'm going to leave this one right here because it may be convenient later in future years. If not, I can take it off next year, not a problem.
Right.
Now, if I had Dan's Wonder loppers, I could probably take that out with loppers. I don't care to because I hurt when I do stuff like that. Now, I don't know if you can see that on the video. I'm going to come right above the branch I'm leaving. I'm leaving this branch right here. Now, I could try cutting this way, but you notice I've got a lot of obstructions on the saw.
And yeah, you end up rubbing bark off.
Exactly.
That way.
So I'm going to come from this angle. And fortunately, this tree gives me a nice line right through there that says, cut me. Not every tree has that. In fact, most don't. But this one is actually really easy to do that way.
I planned it that way.
She's always one step ahead. Now, as I go in here and as I'm sawing, I'm going to support this because I don't want it falling and tearing any bark off.
Sorry, I'm in the way. If I'm in the way there.
Okay.
You just lifted it right off.
Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to thin out branches so that everything gets air, which cuts down on fungal and bacterial infections. And I want sun. Now,
No, you may
issue
not
here.
cut down my blue spruce.
Now, I'm going to take down some of these lower branches. When they're heavy with fruit, they tend to go and interfere with the lawn and sometimes will even sit on the ground. So I'm going to take these out.
Don't take too many out.
When Malia screams, you know I've taken out too much.
Or just enough.
Or just
just-
enough. I would actually agree with
This
that.
is the bad part about working for people who know me. No, not there, not there. Just take. Not there. Do where it forks.
You don't want that one gone, I take
No,
it.
I don't. There we go.
And then he cuts it anyway.
I did. Oh, no, this was the one I was working on earlier. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
You're fired. Okay, now I'm going to sit back and evaluate because my client is over there. Sorry, Malik, micromanaging.
Well, you've got to understand when you do have small trees, you do have less fruit. So every branch is very important to me.
I understand that, but there's always going to be that balance.
Right.
My balance is different than Malise's. This is Malise's yard. She has to live with whatever I do. Now,
And you guys, you've got to understand,
watch
I am
this.
way more picky than a lot of people.
Watch this. I love teasing Malie.
I know.
Okay, now even for me,
You can take off that other lower one to the far right,
This
very
one?
bottom.
yeah,
See, and that can satisfy your desire to
My
butcher my
bloodlust?
tree.
or is it sap lust? Well, wait a second. Now I'm worried because of this branch and this branch are close enough they're going to interfere. And that's why I actually went to this branch, is because I'm looking at the balance between the two. Now I respect that Malie has what she's got and has got to live with it and I don't, but I do want some distance between
Right.
these.
And I agree.
So that will satisfy that for me. Hopefully this one will grow in and fill up this space a little bit more over here. But a lot of times when you're getting branches that are trying to fill in that space, the tree is going to where the most light is. Now if I look up, chances are, if I trim this one back, it's going to allow this one to fill in more.
Right.
Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to go ahead and take out some of these water sprouts or suckers. Water sprouts and suckers are branches that typically grow straight up. Although
Now,
right here I've got a couple that are going straight to the side.
Now let's talk about water suckers or water sprouts and pear trees and what the issue is with that.
Pear trees, okay, trees in general send up water sprouts when they're under stress. Stress can be from lack of watering, too much water, dogs chewing on the base, getting pruned.
Yes.
So this tree has not got a lot of water sprouts. It's got some. This is okay for a pear.
Because we're very careful how we prune this tree and think through it a lot.
Till this year.
Till this year. If I get a ton of water sprouts next year, Dan.
It's my fault. And I've got
Dan,
trees.
sorry, Dan, you're not doing this.
Okay, so back to this one. So we are going to I would really like to see these branches here develop a lot more fruiting. I think we've got some good fruit showing, but I want these to get the sunlight. So I'm going to go through here and again, I'm going to be looking at stuff that's not going to be as good for production and harvest. I'm going to take that out because I'd rather have this one getting the sunlight than this one, even though this is a short tree. Even Malie, who's a few inches shorter than me, can probably harvest all this by hand, I'm guessing.
And it's a little taller than what Dave Wilson usually suggests, but I've never had to use a ladder for pruning or harvesting.
Yeah. Again, I'm opening up sunlight to where I want things to grow and where I want things to fruit. How do you feel about this limb up here, Malie?
It is too tall.
Okay, great. This is why I like Malie. Even though we don't always necessarily agree, it's very easy to see where each other come from, and we'll generally have the same opinion on something.
We may have to fight about it first just for fun.
She wins every time. I've got bruises and scars.
I'm louder.
She's louder.
You may talk more, but I'm louder.
Are you saying I talk a lot? Don't answer that. Okay, now I've got these two. This one looks very, very sucker-like, water sprout-like, but I've got buds here.
That gives me fruit. So
And
let's
I've got
show them
side growth.
how you can tell
Exactly.
where a pear is going to fruit.
This big, fat, juicy-looking bud. Here, let me show you. Very juicy. That's where fruit is going to be. So this is going to fruit quicker than this.
Yep.
And
So this is an older branch.
I love that position. It's
Yeah.
only at most a year older, but it's already decided it wants to fruit.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. Okay. Now I saved this water sprout in here because it might be good for the future. This branch right here, however, is running into another branch, and that's a cardinal sin. Branches don't touch branches. I will say on an apple though, whether it be crab apple or fruiting apple, it is almost impossible to keep branches from rubbing. Now I'm going to cut out some rubbing branches here. This has, see all those nice fat buds on those little spurs? I just cut out a lot of her fruit.
Yes, and I'll have to forgive you later.
Much later.
But I'm
Much
doing
later.
it because this branch right here has more potential for the future. And it's a balancing act.
Yeah.
And Dan will come in and do something different than me. Malie will come in and do something different than me. And I'm
it's all
different
right.
than everybody. And that's all right, because while there is science to this, there's also a bunch of art. And the people I have trained that take to it quickest are the ones who are comfortable in their artistic abilities and their artistic side. I didn't say cocky, I said comfortable. So
You can prune it to be pretty as well as productive.
yes, and in fact, sometimes the pretty trees are the most productive. Sorry, I'm going to take a shot at this apple early. because it's interfering with my pear.
Yes.
Okay, Malie's my pear. Again, over here, I've got a branch that's gonna be rubbing. And instead of taking the whole thing off this time, I'm just gonna shorten it down. That way Malie can keep this fruit and she may not kill me.
Right.
I'm gonna come just whack off those suckers really quick. This one is not a problem this year, but
I would not kill you if you pruned this guy off because he's just starting to crowd.
Yeah. In this case, how about I go for this one?
No, do the lower one.
She wants a lower one. And then I'm going to thin this one out a little bit. Which one do you want?
The one pointing towards me.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, and that gives me some space between those. Now, I could have taken off either of these and it would have been fine.
Fine for you.
From a very technical, science only, effectiveness only, it would have been fine. But either one is fine.
Right.
That's one area that people struggle with, is they get so worried about things that they under prune rather than over prune. In fact, there's two things they do. Either they go in and they just butcher it without regard, or they're so scared that they don't prune enough.
Right.
So if you think that you're good and safe and taking a lot out, then you're wrong. And if you think that if you're worried about every little stem you take out, every little branch, then you're wrong. It's in between somewhere.
Right.
And again, there is no 100% correct way to prune on this detailed scale. There's a lot of personal variation in what you want to accomplish. And like I say, this is Malie's place. She knows what she wants to accomplish. She's got a good brain. And even though I tease her mercilessly, there's nothing wrong with what she said for me to do. Except maybe that branch.
No, that branch was my baby. No, just kidding. So now one other thing to look at is, when we did Dan's video last time, you talked a lot about, Dan talked a lot about energy and pushing energy. But he was doing peaches. Even though he was doing peaches, the same concepts apply to pears, just in a little bit of a different way.
Did I hit you?
You sure did.
Here, let me try that again.
No, so with the peaches, they fruit off of the second year wood. Pears have long-lived spurs. So like right here, this little guy is my fruit for next year, possibly. This little guy, this little guy. So instead of just willy-nilly hacking off branches or tipping them down to the center like Dan was doing to push energy other areas, you've got to watch and see how much of your fruiting wood you're actually cutting off, because it's going to take a couple of years to come back.
In fact, let me show you a great example of that right here. See, this branch is coming down. It's growing kind of tucked behind this one. And what I can do is I can come up here, I come part way, I'm cutting off part of the fruit, but I'm leaving these spurs with fruit. And so it's a compromise. Not everything has to go.
Right.
Not everything has to go, not everything has to be, pristine to the next branch that it's shooting off of. We call that a heading cut, and in fruit trees, I use those a lot. Really, I think we've gotten most of the...
Yeah, I'm actually happy with it.
You're happy with it. Obviously left too much. But anyway.
Somebody take away his pruners. He'll hit me if I try.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty good, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. And I think well, Malie said she's happy, so 2 experts out of 3 agree. Dan took off, so we won't consult him. And I'd say this is done.
Yeah. Now, one thing for just to talk a little bit about the Dave Wilson backyard orcharding. Now that we've reduced the height and the size of my pear tree, if you look at the apple trees around it, they are twice as big.
Huge.
So now we're going to have to go through the apple trees and reduce them so that they're not overwhelming the pear tree. Because if you let one tree, 1 or 2 trees overwhelm the rest of them, you're going to start to see decline.
If you have any questions, put it in the comments below, because Malie will answer them. If she doesn't, I might even get on, and I like watching myself. So
Yes.
anyway, catch y'all later. Manana.
Yeah.